for many people who are starting out, the graph editor is going to be one of those tools that everyone talks about and everyone kind of points out like, oh, what a handy thing. And you might open it and it can be very daunting. So for example, here's the graph editor window down below. You can get to it by going to Windows, Animation Editor, Graph Editor. I always have it just docked down here so I can always just bring it up whenever I need. And if I click and drag and select all my controls, this is what we see. This nightmare spaghetti scape, which is just, it's beautifully colored, but that doesn't really help us at all. Okay, let's zoom in. Somehow it's getting worse. And it's just nightmarish. So, the first thing with the graph editor is basic navigation. Just making sure that we can look at what we want and focus on it. So, how do we do that? Well, first of all, when we're looking at the graph editor, we don't usually want to select all of our controls in the scene. That's not what the graph editor is for. It's not a global control all of your animation at the same time. It is much closer to just focusing on a few specific controls. So, for example, let's just take the cog here. Already, that's much easier to focus on. That is nice and clean, easy to look at. So, even this can get a little confusing and a little daunting when you have all of these different controls here. So, even more, we want to typically focus on just one or two curves at a time. This is where the outliner on the left side here comes in handy. All I need to do is select any of these curves and voila, there is the curve specific to that one attribute. And suddenly, this graph editor that was just a horrible mess to look at, a little bit cleaner, a little bit easier. Now, there are different ways of making this a lot easier. So, for example, one way I like to select controls, instead of using this outliner here, because while I have one control, this is very easy. But if I have multiple controls, let's say I take this 3 spine controls here, and I want to look at the translate X of all of these, or the rotate X, I should say. I would have to click on one, scroll down, click on another, scroll down, click there, and now we see all 3. That's a little bit of a pain. I'm not a fan of that. So, an easy way to do this is if you go to your channel box up here, go to channels, just make sure sync selection in graph editor is checked. What this does is now I can select all these 3 controls and I want to look at the rotate X on all of these. I can just click on rotate X in the channel box, boop, and it selects the rotate X on everything I have selected and it shows it in the graph editor. I want to look at all the rotate Y, boop, there we go. Rotate Z, done. So suddenly I can have a large selection of controls. So I want to take all of these, and I want to look at maybe all of their translate Y. Done. So that makes your life a whole lot easier, especially when you're comparing different controls. You're not having to scroll up and down a list trying to find specific attributes. So sync selection highlights in a specific channel available in all objects. Yes. So if there's channel specific to that one object, so for example this foot control, it's got like foot roll right here. Well, if I take the head control, which does not have that, you can see if I take hair control visibility, nothing's showing up because the foot doesn't have that control. Or vice versa. Let's take foot roll. There's only the one for the foot, so it's not going to show a foot roll for the head. So it's whatever attribute they have in common. So with that, we've got our graph editor, we've got our curves, we can narrow down to 1. Yay! Great. Now, another thing with the graph editor is navigating it. So actually moving within the graph editor itself. It's very much like the rest of the viewport. If you hold down Alt and right click, you can zoom in and out. Same thing with the graph editor. Alt, right click, zoom in and out. If you hold Alt and middle click, just like in the viewport, you can pan. In the channel box, Alt, middle click, you can pan. And Chickentron, to do the channel box thing, just go to Channels in the channel box up here. Sync selection in Graph Editor. Just make sure that is selected. So, along with those two ways of moving in the Graph Editor, there is a third way that is different from most other viewports, which is if you hold down Alt and Shift at the same time, and then right click and drag, you can stretch the Graph Editor. Now this is extremely useful. If you're not using this in the Graph Editor, you are only using the Graph Editor at like 1% of its power. You want to stretch and move the Graph Editor in this kind of way. So for example, if I just look at my curve here, I can see that, oh yeah, it looks like a little bit of a bump right there. Oh, nice. Okay, maybe I'll try to adjust that a little bit. I can do some changes right in here. I can zoom in and oh yeah, I can see that a little bit more. But if I hold down Alt and Shift and then right click drag, I can stretch it. It's not adjusting the curves, it's just stretching the display. Suddenly, I can see a lot more detail on this specific curve. I can see whether maybe there's just a little bit of a bump. I can start to smooth things out much more than I could before. This is going to give you a lot of power in the Graph Editor, a lot of ability to get minute and detailed changes without having to constantly just zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, or just trying to hopefully get it right. So this is something I use all the time. Alt, Shift, right click, drag. And you can go up and down or left and right. And it is a game changer once you get used to that. It really does make the Graph Editor go from somewhat useful to insanely useful, especially for cleanup. Right here I can see there's a little bit of a dip right there. I could just clean that up if I wanted to. And Koza, thank you so much for the follow. So with that, we know how to look at the Graph Editor. We know how to move around in the Graph Editor. We know how to simplify the Graph Editor so we don't have our big plate of spaghetti. With that, the last thing really is how do we read the Graph Editor? And this is the trickiest part that a lot of students run into, is you look at this curve and it's a curve, it's got keys, great. What do I do with this? Well, reading the Graph Editor is actually pretty simple. So for anyone who's totally new to the Graph Editor, basically what the Graph Editor does is it shows you your keys. So these are the keys, the poses that you create in Maya and then save. So all of these are keys. It shows you those values, and then the curve itself, the curve in between those keys, is the interpolation that Maya is creating for you. Basically making it so that, let's say I want to create a cube here on frame 1, set a key. If I go to frame 60 and set another key and then move it forward, you can see there's my first key, my second key, and then Maya fills in the blank for me, which creates the motion. So this is the you're basically looking at what Maya is creating. That's what the graph editor does. It shows us the background animation or what's happening in the back end as Maya is helping us to animate. So with that, we've got our curve, and the curve again is just what Maya is giving us. The poses we save are the keys, these dots. Now, when you're trying to read the graph editor, it can be very tricky at first. So let's actually go to a simpler scene for this here. This is just a bouncing ball. So very basic bouncing ball here. And let's take a look at this graph editor. So when we're looking at a graph editor, there's typically two things that you want to look at and kind of focus on. Nothing more, nothing less. It's just two. One is the angle of the curve. The angle of the curve tells you the speed. If you have a flat curve, so for example right here at the end, this means that nothing is moving. A horizontal flat curve, there's no change. Nothing is happening. A vertical curve means that something is moving quickly. And the more vertical you get, the faster it goes. The more horizontal you go, the slower it goes until it's perfectly flat. That's pretty much it. So, looking at this curve, this is the up and down of the ball, the bounce. What we can see here is that the curve starts out flat, so slow. It speeds up, and then again, fast, slow, so vertical, horizontal, fast, slow, fast, and then fast again, slow. And what this gives us is the speed. So we look at the ball. If we just look at the translate Y, and let's actually, I'm going to mute the translate Z so we get this nice and still. You can see that the ball starts slow, moves faster, it bounces, slows down, right when the curve is flattening out. So as long as you keep that in mind, you can start reading the curve. So for example, this is the forward translation of the ball. Let's unmute this one, and I'm actually going to mute the translate Y. So muting a channel basically just, it doesn't delete the animation, it just freezes it. So if we look at this, the translate Z, let's apply that same principle. Fast curve is steep, slow curve is flat. So it goes fast, slower, 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 and then it's perfectly flat, it's stopped. So if we look at this here, it goes slow, slow, slow to a stop. So fast, and then slow down. That's it. So basically, the closer the line is to being flat, the less changes you will see. Exactly. So if you want a really minute change, your curve is going to be almost flat. If you want something to move very quickly, it's going to be extremely steep. So it's just a very basic thing, and it applies to all curves. Now, the next thing to keep in mind is the change of direction of a curve. So let me unmute this. So the change of direction of a curve basically is the curve moving down or is moving up? So in this case, for example, a bouncing ball, we have the curve going downwards, and then it changes direction. Now it goes up. Now the bouncing ball is kind of an odd one to look at because it is deceptively simple when it shouldn't be. And I'll explain that in just a second. But if we take a look at this, think of the translate Y. And once again, let's mute the translate Z just so we don't have to focus on that. As the ball comes down, we can see it's dropping. And then as the curve changes direction, the ball changes direction as well. It goes up. And then the curve changes again here. So it's going up, now it's curving back down. The ball changes direction. There we go. It's basically just telling us that there is a change of direction in this curve. Now this applies to anything. For example, let's say I have my translate Z. Let's bring it back and unmute selected. Let's say instead of just slowing down here, what if the ball did this? Well, if we think about it, what's this curve telling us? Well, one, it's moving in one direction. It's going down. Okay. It's starting fast, slowing down as the curve flattens out, and then it changes direction. So its translate Z, in this case the side to side, is going one direction, and then it changes. And it speeds up and slows down. So it's going fast, slow, and there's a change of direction in the middle. If we look at this, there we go. Starts off fast, slows down midway, changes direction, and there we go. That's it. There's only those two things. And you can apply this to any curve that you ever work with in the graph editor, in any animation that you work in, regardless of the complexity. As long as you keep those two things in mind, you can basically visualize, kind of like if you've seen The Matrix and you look at the code and they can see the woman in red. That's basically what you can do by looking at the curve. You can visualize what's happening in that one attribute. What direction is it going? What's happening to it? Is it slowing down? Is it speeding up? Should it be doing that? That's when we start cleaning things up. One common hurdle, and I mentioned this earlier, is that when you're animating the bouncing ball, which is typically the first animation many people are going to do, they look at the translate Y, and this kind of becomes a basis that they use to analyze the graph editor. In the sense that we look at our translate Y and we go, oh, down, up, it's the bounce. It's the same thing as if I go, and let's go into my animation menu set here, and track the curve. Look at that. Up, down, up, down. It's the same. Let's actually clean up my curve here. There we go. It's so similar. It must mean it matches up. No. This is circumstantial. It is just, in this case, they tend to match up. That's it. The curves in the graph editor do not represent the trail, the actual motion that your object is going through in space. All it represents is that one attribute. And this is a very, very important thing to keep in mind, because I see a lot of students, and this is something I fell into very much when I started out. You try to start picking a direction for it. So for example, the up and down, oh, it's easy. So we start up and then down. So if a curve is going down, that's moving the ball down. If it goes up, that means the ball goes up. Ah, I've got it now. So that means that if the curve here goes down, that must mean that it goes right. Oh, I've got it. I've got all of these directions planned out. It makes so much sense. Except that only works if your camera doesn't move, and if your character doesn't walk in a circle or doesn't do anything slightly complex. The moment that happens, it's all out the window. So, for example, if I just go to my perspective view and do this, well, now the ball's going screen left. So now this downward direction of the curve means it's going screen left. What if I do this? Well, now that up and down is totally inversed. What if it's not a bouncing ball bouncing on the floor, but maybe something under the ice and it's trying to break through the ice and it's in the water? So it really just depends on your camera view. So don't try to get really complex and break it down to specific directions or like really get into that nitty gritty. That's is not necessary, and oftentimes it can just lead you astray. Keep it simple. What is the speed of the curve? Is it vertical or flat? And is there a change of direction? And you basically just go, okay, there's a change of direction in the translate Y. Okay, there's a change of direction in the translate Z. That's it. So Greg, for the curve here, just select your object, go to visualize, create editable motion trail. That should get you that trail there. So this is a bouncing ball. Let's actually apply it to a full character. So we've got a much more complex shot here. Now, for anyone who hasn't seen this, this was an animation demo I had done a long time ago on stream, which was basically just a little bit of dialogue as well as just kind of getting some upper body motion. Now, technically, this shot was never meant to be seen below the elbows. It was supposed to end like right here. So watch the knee pops and enjoy the non-polished feet and how they're just glued in place like they've been super glued. But this was a demo I'd done a while back. But you can see this is a lot of complex motion. There's a lot of hand stuff. There's character leaning forward, all of that. Well, let's look at the graph editor. So if I take the hips, let's say, let's focus on the rotate X. This is the forward rotation of the body. And here's the curve. Now, if we kind of look at this, we can start to break it down. So what's happening? Well, the rotate X, the forward rotation, starts off slow, speeds up, and then slows down. So he's leaning. Now, which way is he leaning? Is he leaning forward or back? Instead of trying to like remember, okay, up is forward and down is back. Don't worry about that. Just scrub through a little bit. So as he goes forward here, let's actually pick a spot that's a little faster. Right here. Okay, so as he goes up, we can see that that whole curve is going down. There we go. So now we know that the upwards curve means that he's leaning forward. So with that, let's actually look at it. So he starts slow, he leans forward, slows down, changes direction. He overshoots and comes back. So there's my overshoot right there. And he settles and he stops. Then we get another lean forward. Goes up, goes very fast before slowing down and changing direction. And then comes in to a nice ease to a stop right there. We get an anticipation. He leans back a little bit before going forward again. I can see all of that right in here. Without having to look at my animation, I know what's going on. And I can tell, well, maybe, like this is a big, fast motion here. There might be a reason to anticipate here. Maybe it should go like this. Have a little anticipation before that fast motion. You can start to analyze your curve and see if it makes sense. Now, this doesn't mean that you smooth out the curve all the time. So for example, here, you could go, oh, but that's not smooth. It should be like this. Nice and round and smooth. No. Sometimes you want hitches in animation. So for example, I can do that and have this kind of little jerk in my head motion. That's normal. We don't always have to move in big, slow, even circles. But as long as it makes sense to me, why is he suddenly, like he's moving very fast and then just stops very suddenly? Well, let's take a look here. So he comes forward, his hips go forward, and what he's doing is he's locking his knees. So right there, you can see how his knees snap tight. That's what's causing that hitch. His knees lock and it stops his hips before they have enough energy to keep going. There's a reason for this. So that's fine. I can keep it. But it's my choice. it's not just a matter of cleaning up the graph editor because it's got to be clean. I'm making conscious choices of why I want to have a certain thing happen. And all of it comes from understanding what the graph editor means. And once you have that, you can apply it to any curve. So any of these, you can just start analyzing and making sense of them. And that's pretty much it. There's not that much more to the graph editor in terms of basic understanding and using it to improve your animations. Now there are things like the different tangent types, and you've got buffer curves and all of these other tools that can help you use the graph editor a little bit more efficiently. But those can come later. When you're first starting out, just having that basic understanding and making sure you understand what it is you're looking at makes a big difference.